Owari no Seraph has made itself a hot topic this season with its questionable narrative style and violent overtones. It's received its fair share of stick from the community for some of the choices it made in its first few episodes. Anime like this come round every now and again, and tend to stir the community up quite a bit. Many have claimed that Seraph is bad, poorly handled and edgy, so in this video I'm going to investigate. I'm going to look at how they presented the start of their story, where they went wrong, and if needed, how could they have done it better. The first episode of an anime is the easiest to pull off, since you don't necessarily have to address everything you bring up. You can get away with doing things that would be impossible down the line. Some of my favourite first episodes were ones that completely broke all the rules of storytelling, confusing the viewer with bold narrative decisions. Obviously these elements only work if they're addressed further on in the series, but it's always interesting to see what new ideas people have planned for the first episode. Now by all means, this doesn't mean you can't mess up a first episode. It's actually just as easy to mess up a first episode. So let's dive right into Seraph's first episode. So in the first minute of the anime, everybody dies. In a matter of seconds it turns from a normal street scene into a post-apocalyptic scene where everybody is dead, and all the lights are turned off. Not sure if that's part of the plot or not. To be honest, a pretty rash start that probably should have been stretched out a little longer. It seems they weren't that interested of showing the effects of what just happened, which is a shame because that would have actually been quite a cool thing to see. It adds its next plot point by showing a bunch of people, not dead, with cloaks on. So that's the initial introduction to the series. Let's see how they go on and develop it. We're shown a city shot that pans down on a bunch of kids running across the street, so I guess not everybody is dead. It looks like there are some lights on too. Guess only some of the lights were affected. Very spooky. Now we have the first real piece of poor writing, an extremely unimaginative piece of info dumping. Yummy. So the anime goes on to literally explain to the viewer what has just happened and is about to happen. And then for the second time, the show feels the need to keep the viewer up to date, so it explains what's happening once again. So quickly, let's look at how they could have done this without having to info dump. Well, they kind of already did this. Through the kids running through the town, we can see that only adults have died. Why else would there be a large group of kids running around on their own at this time? It's obvious and should have been the choice of writing. So the next plot point is that the kids have been taken away by the characters we saw at the start. Notice we have no real introduction to these characters so far, so this plot point holds no emotional value. The scene ends and we skip 4 years into the future. Nice, a random time skip that has no meaning and left the whole start of the episode to feel a bit unexplained and random. We're reintroduced to the children and their current situation. Our main character has his hands in his pockets, so he must be cool, right? It's alluded that the people are using the children for something in their blood, though they decide not to give us any of that information. Not even a hint. How unkind. We focus back onto our two main characters as the show tries a little bit of development. Our main character rejects the, from what I presume, medicine. He crushes it and throws it away. Yup, still the cool guy. When I saw this scene I thought maybe our character was aware of some brainwashing or controlling drug in this drink. But nope, he just doesn't like the taste. A missed opportunity for some really good development there, guys. We have some pretty standard personality introduction here, as Mr. Cool asserts his rebellious attitude and the other says he wants to live peacefully. They really could have tried to make the characters a little more unique. What's weird about this is there's no throwback to what happened 4 years ago. It's almost as if every adult human didn't die and they weren't kidnapped. Surely it's worth mentioning. Another plot point here is that two bad guys walk in and stand on the toes of two children. They show no emotional response, so they must be the bad guys, right? This is actually very poor writing. Their intentions are just too obvious and the kids' reactions are just too over the top. Subtlety is key when doing things like this. The writing here showed none of this. They could have done this with a lot more subtlety and gained the exact same results. We're introduced to another character as he conveniently walks in. He invited them to his mansion because they have nice blood. So the vampires are taking their blood for pleasure? It certainly seemed that as he's taking a personal preference. So let's quickly recap on what we know so far. All we know is that these kids are here for some reason. We don't know who they are, why they survived, why their blood is wanted, what they do at this place, and if it's permanent. We don't know much at all. In the next scene, one of our characters explains why he gives blood to the vampire. He said because the vampire gives him food. And then there's some dialogue with a new female kid character that I won't bother talking about because it's just generic chatter. It's used to basically explain the last few scenes, in case the viewers got distracted by a shiny object or something. And there's a flashback because they couldn't be bothered writing emotions into the dialogue and they had to info dump. Yay. So I'm moving on from the scene now because the dialogue is actually too bad for me to watch again. Okay, next scene, everybody is sitting at a table with more dumb dialogue. Notice how they keep referring to things in the past without actually addressing them. They're basically saying, this is a plot point we want you to be attached to, but can't think of a way to write it into the story. And then you guessed it, Even more info dumping about how the characters are actually kind. This is one of the worst parts about Seraph. It's dialogue. It's also poorly written. It's too blatant and wastes valuable time. It's almost as if they didn't spend that much time blending the dialogue into the episode. It could have all been done a lot better in a fraction of the time. Skipping through even more dialogue and the characters try to escape. I wonder how that will go. On their way they talk about how they can't wait to get out over and over again because they need to spell out their emotions to the viewer. So you're escaping the city. What's the best thing to do? Well, of course it's pick a route that goes through the biggest fucking room available. Everybody's so happy, they're only one step away from freedom. Surely nothing can go wrong, right? That wouldn't be predictable or generic writing at all. So they forget the whole sneaking thing and choose to walk straight through the middle of this massive open room. Lucky for them, the vampire character is waiting for them all along. Oh no. Then the vampire goes on to kill all the random children. Does this make sense? Doesn't he want their blood? Why would he waste all that blood for no reason? Now this is absolutely terrible writing. I mean literally getting the basics of storytelling wrong. They obviously thought that killing multiple characters at once would be emotionally impactful for the viewer. And sure, Game of Thrones does that a lot, and it does have quite an emotional impact. But that's because Game of Thrones has 20 to 30 hours of character development before the scenes. The viewer cared for the characters that are dying. I mean there was barely 20 minutes of screen time for Seraph, regardless of any character development. There was nothing here to make us care about these deaths. And apparently every adult died about 10 minutes of screen time ago. Why should we care about 6 more random people? This scene was just dumb. It had poor writing, it had bad timing, it felt pointless, and was a waste of what could have been an emotional scene had it been done 6 or 7 episodes later. To improve the scene? Not possible. You can't just kill characters like this with no development and expect an emotional response. If I had to change it, I would have added an internal conflict between some of the characters, causing them to fail the escape themselves. Then they could have some time to develop the characters and maybe make me care about them. So the main character escapes with the generic motives of revenge. He now hates the enemy because they killed off his friends, a premise we've seen 100 times before, and just to extinguish any possibility of some post-event thoughts, we have another 4-year time skip. Again choosing to skip out on the character's real reactions. These time skips seem to have been an excuse to not have to do any writing for emotional scenes. Overall, this episode was a poor setup for the series. It chose to skip important opportunities to develop characters and would rather tell the viewer what to think through info dumping. I might revisit this in a video for future episodes and see how bad the series gets, but I'm making no promises. Anyway, thank you very much for watching the video. Be sure to share this video around and post your thoughts in the comments. So, see you next time.